Chapter 21. Talking to Mr. Qin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 21. Talking to Mr. Qin. Translator David T. Editor. Sell. As for tonight's reconnaissance to the eastern trading court, Ling Tian felt that his harvest was still considered to be on the good side. After all, it was his first time going forth to spy on people, and to already catch wind of such news made him very satisfied. In fact, Ling Tian could not help but fantasize in his heart, "Don't tell me everyone who crossed through world are so lucky, receiving such important news in just a casual reconnaissance." The crux of this lay in the fact that Ling Tian's timing was perfect. Firstly, Ling Zhen got himself beaten up for no rhyme or reason, and thus must have accumulated quite a bit of hatred in his heart. Second was the fact that Ling Kong would feel a pain in his heart for the condition of his child and thus try to console him. As for the timing that Ling Tian himself chose, he was very clear that the content that Ling Kong and his son would discuss today would be regarding unscrupulous matters which would cause the both of them to be buried without a tombstone if revealed. Hence, to be careful, they only left such matters to be discussed in the dead of the night. Thus Ling Tian planned his time accurately. Just as both father and son had just opened the curtains to the discussion on their betrayal, Ling Tian was already noiselessly perched on top of their roof. Ling Tian pondered over this. The news obtained today was enough to prove that both father and son did not harbor any good intentions in their hearts, to the point that the reason Ling Xiao and Chu Tinger had been married for so long but did not bear any offspring was also plotted by Ling Kong himself. In addition to that, Ling Tian realized that Ling Kong had been scheming as such, working behind the scenes for over a decade, aiming to take control of the various income-generating businesses of the Ling family. The Northwest Ranch, which was considered one of the main sources of revenue for the Ling family, had also now fallen into Ling Kong's grasp. If Ling Tian were to make a rash moves, just these pillars of strength which Ling Kong controlled definitely had the ability to plunge the Ling family into chaos. Both Ling Kong and son were harboring malicious intents. They secretly plotted to wrest away control of the Ling family's businesses as well as cause irreparable damage to Chu Tinger. Both father and son would have to pay for their crimes with death. However, Ling Tian knew that this timing was not the most opportune moment to expose them. Only by disclosing those working undercover under the orders of Ling Kong and catching them in one fell swoop, could he avoid any future repercussions. This would be the best way to go about doing things. With Ling Tian's current strength, wanting to let Ling Kong and his son disappear without a sign was as easy as merely lifting a finger. But this way, the undercover forces of Ling Kong, the people who were in cahoots with them to betray the family, would also sink under wraps and would never surface to surrender themselves. Thus, it would be immensely difficult to deal with all of them. Furthermore, one had to take into consideration the reaction of Ling Zhan. After all, Ling Kong was his godson. Thus, if he were to take action without proper proof, his grandfather would fly into a rage without doubt. At this point, Ling Tian merely smiled coldly. If that's the case, then let me treat it as raising a pig for the slaughter. Sooner or later, your life will still end in my hands. Since I can't silence you both for the moment, then I shall treat it as though I have obtained another 2 playthings. As soon as the second day started, after Ling Tian had finished with his meal, he proceeded towards the study room. Mr. Qin was dressed in a green robe today. Standing by the door watching the tiny figure of Ling Tian plodding towards him, he had a complicated expression in his eyes. Naturally, only Ling Tian turned up for lessons today. Even if one threatened to beat Ling Zhen to death, he probably would never want to stay in the same room as Ling Tian for study ever again. As for the matter of Ling Zhen not turning up, Ling Tian's response was apathetic, as though he had long expected it, or had been forewarned. Mr. Qin secretly sized up this student of his and found out that he was getting more and more mysterious. At such a small age, his actions were ruthless, yet his intelligence was beyond the roof with the gift of the gab. However, he was stubborn and unyielding, and liked to do things his own way. This was the impression Mr. Qin got from his student at that particular moment. Seeing Ling Tian sitting there prim and proper with an unrestrained face, Mr. Qin suddenly felt as though Ling Tian had come into this lesson completely prepared. His previous methods were to first talk about the greater meaning behind studying, so as to motivate the student to study harder. However, facing this kid, Mr. Qin somehow felt that he could save his saliva by eliminating all that nonsense. Clearing his throat, Mr. Qin put his hands behind his back and straightened his expression, saying, "For the first lesson, this old man will first lecture about etiquette. From the past till the present, manners were never disregarded. It is widely believed and known that to be human means to have manners, and manners is the first of many." He continued gabbling non-stop. Ling Tian naturally understood why Mr. Qin started talking about etiquette in the very first lesson. This was due to him being too willful yesterday, plus the fact that he mauled his cousin, Ling Zhen, for no apparent reason. Thus, the old man decided to put in some effort in an attempt to guide him towards the correct path. Thinking up to here, Ling Tian's natural restless state began to calm down. Although the old man did not truly understand the actual application of his lecture, such a dedication was admirable. It could be seen that even though Mr. Qin was a very rigid person and overly conventional by nature, he definitely lived up to the name of a learned scholar. Ling Tian's heart warmed at his effort and he decided to continue to seriously pay attention to the lesson. As for Mr. Qin, he had gabbled non-stop for quite a while now, to the point that his spittle was flying everywhere, but he did not reduce the speed at which he was speaking. Ling Tian's guts twisted as he involuntarily felt the urge to laugh. This was undoubtedly a plan to attack Ling Tian's confidence, and, if he guessed correctly, the old man was already preparing to bombard him with questions. Indeed, once the old man snapped the book shut on his hands, he put on a stern face and coldly asked, as to what teacher had said previously, "Can you remember them all?" Ling Tian immediately started laughing inside. This was proceeding exactly like how he guessed it. Putting on a sincerely respectful face, he replied, "Just now, like Sir was saying, from the past till the present, manners were never disregarded. It is widely believed and known that to be human means to have manners, and manners is the first of many." That little mouth suddenly started gabbling non-stop, regurgitating whatever Mr. Qin spoke moments ago without missing out a single word. Mr. Qin was overwhelmed with shock. Pointing at Ling Tian, his tongue moved but he was unable to get a word out. The expression in his eyes was one of extreme shock. However, that lasted only a while before it turned into one of extreme joy. For a student to find a good teacher might be difficult, but for a teacher to find a good student required double the effort. The difficulty could be described as though a horse connoisseur has spotted a herd of 1,000-mile colts. Mr. Qin originally thought that with the Ling family up and coming, and their businesses booming, it was just a matter of circumstance for him to come over to teach. The first impression he personally witnessed of Ling Tian yesterday also left him disappointed beyond belief. But who knew that by testing him today, he would find out that this student was intelligent beyond compare. With such a good memory, what's more one where he could memorize sentences just by hearing them once, Mr. Qin was overcome with utmost joy. Seeing the elation on Mr. Qin's face, Ling Tian was glad and could not help but think to himself. Seems like crossing through worlds does bring about quite a lot of benefits. No wonder those novels always comment about people crossing through different worlds having an impeccable memory. Seems like there is an element of truth in it. At least for me, wasn't what just happened a very good example? Mr. Qin was obviously gratified. He stroked his beard, smiling so hard that his eyes were reduced to slits as he exclaimed, "Tianer, you have a gift blessed by the heavens. So long as I personally guide and groom you for the next 5 years, I'm afraid that the imperial court would definitely want to rope you in for a major role." Talking up to this point, he suddenly felt as though he was uttering gibberish. It was the son of the great General Ling Xiao, grandson of old Master Ling and the nephew of the royal concubine he was talking about. If he did not have a major role to play when he entered the imperial court, then that would be weird beyond belief. With his heart so pleased, he did not even realize that he had changed the way he addressed Ling Tian, now calling him Tianer instead. With a childish smile on his face, Ling Tian replied, Tianer has felt Mr.'s heart and effort, and knows that only by seriously studying can I repay Mr.'s efforts spent on teaching me and not sully Mr.'s name. Mr. Qin was jolted as he heard Ling Tian's words and glanced at him in interest before asking, share with me, what type of heart and effort have you felt within teacher? He was extremely curious. At such a tender age, having such a heaven-blessed memory was already rare enough. If he were to even have such acute and profound senses towards one's emotions, then Mr. Qin could only label him as a freak. Although he thought this way, Mr. Qin was still filled with expectations to the answer in which Ling Tian would give. On Ling Tian's face appeared a smile full of intelligence as he spoke. Tianer once heard that usually when Mr. teaches your students, you would first start from letting them familiarize themselves with words, going through the 4 books and 5 sutras in order. However, when Mr. started lessons today, you instead started talking about etiquette. There must be some inner meaning to this. By now, Mr. Qin could no longer contain the waves in his heart as he thought. Could it really be that such a genius can exist in this world? He could only continue questioning, so, what inner meaning do you think teacher would have by doing this? Ling Tian leisurely continued, I assume Mr. must have seen me being willful and even beating up an innocent person yesterday, and deduced that I was not being taught properly in the past, and thus decided to start with talking about etiquette and manners in order to alter my mind. Mr. Qin's heart nearly stopped beating right there and then. His pair of eyes opened wide till they looked like saucers, as though he just met a sort of demon. Ling Tian only gave a noncommittal smile before he continued dropping bombshells. When I met Mr. yesterday, Tianer had already found Mr. to be an upright and trustable man. This was in addition to the fact that Mr. has students everywhere and yet still has the reputation of being just and honest. Thus, Tianer could not bring himself to deceive you. I would like Mr. to help me to protect this secret. I will not disappoint Mr. as well as the teachings you have imparted, and will make your name resound throughout the lands under heaven. Ling Tian had seen through this old man long ago. Inflexible he might have been, but he was definitely someone he could trust. Besides, Ling Tian still had quite a number of years to spend with this old man and thus some things could not be hidden for long. If that was the case, it was better to say it out openly so that they could clear the air. Mr. Qin was so moved that his body started trembling involuntarily. With tears in his eyes, he said, from the time I started teaching till now, from those of low backgrounds all the way to those descendants of nobles, I have never seen a person whose intellect can match yours, Tianer. To be able to have such a fine student in my life, this old man has no more regrets in this life. A snow-white brow, however, creased. If so, why did you do that yesterday? Ling Tian merely gave a brief smile, saying, Mr., I had to divert the tiger's attention and give a signal to those people with hidden meanings. The Ling family's descendant, after all, is only me, Tianer. This is to prevent matters from blowing up and increasing the unhappiness of everyone. The meaning of Ling Tian's sentence was extremely obvious, and although Mr. Qin might have been an inflexible person, he was in no way devoid of sense. Always aware of and up to date with the current news, he obviously knew what Ling Tian implied. He could not help but look at this child with admiration. Now Ling Tian laughed, let me first inform Mr. that from today, I will be a lazy and idle good for nothing, with no motivation whatsoever to improve himself. Will Mr. please forgive me at that time? This came as another bombshell to Mr. Qin, causing him to be stunned silly. He could only reply, why would you do such a thing? His eyes turning cold, Ling Tian replied, don't tell me Mr. cannot see the situation that my family is currently in. Though we may look glamorous on the outside, we are actually surrounded by danger. Any slightest pretext would cause our clan to be destroyed and our members to be killed, consigned to eternal damnation. Might I ask teacher, if a genius appeared in the Ling family at such a time, and rumors were to spread, what kind of scenario would we see? Mr. Qin instantly trembled in fright. As an outsider, he could of course see the situation that the Ling family was currently in. However, because the previous 2 generations of the Ling family members were all courageous without a scrap of being scheming, and along with their unswerving loyalty to the royal family, everyone chose to let things go as per normal. If one were to eliminate the Ling family without careful consideration, the resulting chaos would be on the scale of affecting the entire empire and would even shake the very foundations of it. As a monarch, that was not something they would want to see. In addition, since all the members were under the control of the royal family, while they might seem to be in a precarious position, they were actually extremely stable. However, Ling Tian's appearance would be enough to shatter this balance. With his intellect, he had already exceeded the baseline of the other major powers' tolerance. Even Mr. Qin could not predict what sort of scenario would happen when Ling Tian receives the baton for the head of the family. This sort of character was akin to a dragon in the heavens. How could he be satisfied with living while being below someone? Thus, once word about Ling Tian spreads, the Ling family would meet with a disaster. Being a 5-year-old, and yet having his sights set so far even to the point of meticulously planning and preparing a set of strategies in advance, this sort of intellect could be considered fearful. Thinking to this point, Mr. Qin suddenly realized that he had been unknowingly chained onto the broken boat that was the Ling family, and that he had no way of escaping. He could only point a shaking finger in the direction of that despicable fellow in stupefaction, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Haze. Without knowing, this old man was actually pulled into your plans. You this. The face of Ling Tian now broke into a smile that resembled a sly smile from a fox. Mr. Now understands, right? Mr. Qin could only slump down on his chair, wanting to cry but not having any tears coming out. Suddenly, Ling Tian stood up and solemnly bowed towards Mr. Qin. This matter concerns the life of my family clan and our tens of thousands of lives. Hence, your student has no choice but to carry out such a method. If I had insulted Mr. in any way, then please forgive me. Your student here swears that, as long as the Ling family lives for a day, we will ensure that you and your family are protected. May heaven curse me if I go back on my word. Mr. Qin hurriedly helped him up, sighing as he spoke. What you did was forced by your circumstances, so who could blame you? Forget it, I am also getting old, I do not have much days left. For the most brilliant student I've ever had in my life, this old man will make a gamble for once. How about that? Breaking into a beaming smile, Ling Tian replied, Mr. will definitely live to a ripe old age. As he spoke, the smile on his face looked like it could be taken by one's hands, and with the ruddy complexion on his little face, it made him look unbelievably cute. Mr. Qin could only stare directly at him, before finally letting out a great sigh. Are you a 5-year-old child, or a 1,000-year-old fox in disguise? Maintaining the smile, Ling Tian flashed his teeth at him. Why don't Mr. try guessing? Chapter 22. Commotion on the streets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 22. Commotion on the streets. Translator David T. Editor. Ling Tian felt extremely refreshed. Although he looked like he was taking a huge risk when he was talking to Mr. Qin, it was actually an extremely high-level technique. First, he used his superb memory to stimulate the old man's love for talent. Then, he used the curiosity generated from that and slowly revealed a few secrets of his, gradually grasping Mr. Qin within the palm of his hands. As a result, Mr. Qin was no longer able to pull himself out of it, and Ling Tian had successfully solved his problem for the next few years. You have to know, Mr. Qin only had one way out now. Although he could reveal Ling Tian's secret, he would lose a genius disciple and lose the only chance he had to shock the world. Furthermore, the lives of his family would be in grave danger as well. No matter how greatly the Ling family falls, it would still be an easy task for them to take care of such a small family. Besides, if he were to betray the family he was working for, he would become a disgraceful traitor. Mr. Qin's good reputation which had spread across the country would then be destroyed in that single instant, leaving behind a bad name for himself in history books. To someone like Mr. Qin who values reputation more than his life, he would rather die 10,000 times rather than take the risk with something like this. If Mr. Qin were to keep this secret, it would mean that the benefits to himself and his family would be enormous. If he were to have a strong backing like that of the Ling family, any problems he faced in the country in future would be easily settled. With Ling Tian's intelligence, he would definitely shock the world when his wings are given sufficient time to grow. At that time, Mr. Qin, who was the first teacher of Ling Tian, would also become famous worldwide. This is precisely the thing which Mr. Qin had been chasing after his whole life. Now that he had the chance to fulfill it, he would hold on to this opportunity tightly even if it meant his whole body would be shattered into pieces. The conditions which Ling Tian offered was something that Mr. Qin was unwilling and unable to reject. In fact, it was exactly what he wanted. Ling Tian then thought about an extremely crude way of describing the situation. An adulterous couple clicked together well. After having that conversation with Mr. Qin, Ling Tian felt extremely relaxed. With satisfaction, he openly took his 2 servants and walked out of the main gate of the Ling mansion. Behind him, Mr. Qin's face had already changed many times. Then, he scolded a vulgarity which he had never scolded before in his life and kicked the stool which Ling Tian was sitting on far away. Following which, he stood there in a daze, with a comfortable smile on his face. At times, he was smiling, and at times, he was angry. The myriad of emotions on his face was as though he was a mad man. Ling Tian, who had large eyes and rosy cheeks, was dressed in a white robe and sang happily on the streets. He began to shout out to the skies, "My comrades, 1949 is here. The Chinese people are liberated." The 2 servants who were behind him looked at each other strangely, sighing together, "Youth is the best indeed. Look at how happy our young master is. When his mood was at his best, something bad would definitely ruin it." This was something which Ling Tian had experienced very often. Suddenly, a large commotion broke out on the streets as Ling Tian could hear people screaming. There was a man who walked out of the gambling house with a face full of smiles and a string of coins more than half full. It seemed that his luck was pretty good. Just when he walked out of the gambling house, he was knocked down to the floor by a small figure and his coins scattered all over the place. Before he even had a chance to scold, the little figure had already gotten up and ran towards the city gates. Behind him, the man who was on the floor began to scold, F***K, little brat, this daddy here will definitely skin you alive if I catch you. The small figure then passed by Ling Tian and Ling Tian saw him clearly. He was a 7 to 8 years old boy who was extremely skinny. His clothes were in tatters with a face full of soil. His teeth were grit tightly as he ran out towards the city gates without looking back at all. Ling Tian exclaimed. Ling Tian was shocked at the speed of this little fellow. It was obvious that this boy had never practiced martial arts before. But when he was sprinting, that little body of his was controlled perfectly and he was faster than ordinary adults. From the steam rising from the top of his head, Ling Tian could tell that this little boy had been running for a long period of time. If not, why would he be drenched in sweat even in this cold weather? It seems that his resolve isn't too bad either. Ling Tian was curious. Why is he running? He looks too flustered, it is as though there is a hungry wolf chasing after him. When Ling Tian was thinking, that boy could no longer be seen, leaving behind the cursing people whom the boy had bumped into. Following which, Ling Tian could hear dozens of people sprinting. It seems that these people must be chasing after that boy, Ling Tian thought to himself. Ling Tian looked towards the direction at which the boy came from and saw the crowd dispersing and ran over like a wave. Ling Tian frowned for a moment. Then, a thought flashed across his mind. He then walked up to the guy who was scolding and kicked him in the abdomen, shameful thing. Why are you so arrogant? After receiving a sudden forceful kick, that man immediately curled up on the floor like a shrimp as his face cramped up from the pain. With a vicious glare in his eyes, he scolded, "Little bastard! You are seeking death." Ling Tian then kicked him again. "Shameful thing, you dare to scold this young master." Then Ling Tian gave him yet another kick. Everyone on the street suddenly felt as though their horizons were widened. There was actually a well-dressed boy who was definitely less than 10 years old kicking a man over 20 years old. The crowd began to gather and the street was completely jammed up. As the two servants saw that this gambler dared to humiliate their young master, they were completely enraged. They immediately took a step forward and slapped a few teeth out of the gambler. "You dare to humiliate the young master. You deserve death." Their punches then rained on the man. The gambler finally realized that the one who kicked him was dressed in luxurious clothes and looked like the child of a rich family. In that instant, he could tell that he had offended someone whom he should not have. He then began to plead with his hands wrapped around his head and body curled up into a ball. The people in the crowd then looked towards Ling Tian with a tinge of fear in their eyes. Just which family does this child belong to? Why is he so domineering? The few black-dressed burly men who were chasing after the boy suddenly saw that the streets were jammed up. They could not help but be angry and shouted, "All of you unrelated people, move aside. We have things to do." He then stretched his hands out and pushed those on the outer rims of the crowds to the side. Ling Tian immediately looked up. Who dares to be so rude? As servants of the Ling mansion, the both of them already had the habit of being prideful and domineering. They then stepped out from the crowd with arms crossed and nose raised up high. "The young master of the Ling family is settling something, who dares to disturb him?" The arrogance which they had in their tone was something that even government officials wouldn't dare to have. The few men dressed in black were then stunned and realized that something was wrong. They are actually from the Ling mansion. The young master of the Ling family is actually present. They then looked towards each other with hesitation. Although they were not government officials, but who in the country wouldn't know about the Ling family? With the power the Ling family had, it was naturally not something which these small little gangs like them could offend. Thus, they immediately retreated. Chapter 23. Planned Disturbance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 23. Planned Disturbance. Translator David T. Editor. Since Ling Tian had already achieved what he wanted, he would not go too far. He then took out a silver ingot and threw it at the gambler who was kicked by him. Following which, he raised his head and walked out slowly. With a snort, he asked calmly, "Who are you guys? You guys actually dare to be so domineering in the city, do you still have the law in your eyes?" As Ling Tian said that, everyone wanted to faint. This brat previously ignored the law and attacked someone for no reason, beating a few of his teeth out. If not for these people who arrived, that gambler would probably be dead in his hands already. Now he was actually acting justified and asking if they had the law in their eyes. The men dressed in black had a face full of anxiousness. But he did not dare to offend Ling Tian. Although he really wanted to just slap that brat to the sight, Ling Tian's background did not allow him to do that. Thus, he cupped his hands and said, reporting to young Master Ling, "We are the subordinates of the Blood Rose Hall. We have received orders to leave the city to handle some matters. We did not know that young master is here and had ruined your fun. This subordinate here apologizes for that." Ling Tian then made a soft, "Oh," and pretended that he was interested. "What are you guys going to do? Tell this young master." The man dressed in black almost went crazy, thinking to himself, this little brat. Helpless, he could only reveal a face of difficulty. "I hope that young master will understand. This matter involves the secret of the Blood Rose Hall and this subordinate cannot spread it." Ling Tian then chuckled and said, "What you mean is that you cannot tell me." Sweat began to trickle down the forehead of the man dressed in black as he replied, "It is not that I cannot. It is just that this subordinate status is just too low. How about Ling Tian then laughed as his face lit up and said magnanimously, since it isn't convenient for you guys to say it, forget it then. This young master isn't too curious anyway. Alright, go and do your stuff, this young master will not delay you. The man dressed in black cursed in his heart, damn it, this still isn't called curious. This is called not delaying us. Now that you stopped us, who knows where that son of AB*TCH is now. However, he did not dare display any of those as he replied, thank you young master, we will take our leave. With a wave of his right hand, the men in black weaved through the crowd and continued to give chase. Ling Tian could not help but be taken aback. After he slowed them down on purpose, everyone who had a little bit of experience would know that it was almost impossible for them to catch the boy back again. But these men in black actually did not give up and continued to give chase. But the boy whom they were chasing after was obviously just a 7 to 8-year-old child. Ling Tian then scratched his chin and thought to himself, don't tell me there is something strange going on. Ling Tian was curious. The next moment, Ling Tian could not help but scold himself for being an idiot. Currently, it was snowing so heavily. It wouldn't matter if the boy did not exit the city. But the moment he leaves the city, the footprints would be enough to find him. Ling Tian was extremely interested in the boy who ran away for a single reason. The resolute look on his face as he grit his teeth. Also, it was because of the great control he displayed when he was escaping. That desperate escape reminded Ling Tian about the hopelessness in his previous life. After standing there for a moment, Ling Tian decided that he would go and take a look. He then looked towards the two servants following him and said, both of you return first. If old master asks, just say that I will be back soon. The two servants were shocked and said, young master, we will not dare to do so. Please take us along with you if you have anything to do. Ling Tian's eyes narrowed as he said, since I asked the both of you to go back, you too should go back. Why? You aren't going to listen to me now. The chill in his voice was full of threat. The both of them fell into a dilemma. If they don't listen to Ling Tian, he would definitely get angry. Ling Tian was someone who dared to even beat Ling Zhen. If they didn't listen to him, they would definitely end up in a plight worse than Ling Zhen. But if the both of them were to return on their own and something happens to Ling Tian, 100 lives of theirs won't be enough to repay their mistakes. The both of them looked at each other and were determined, young master, we are willing to accept your punishment. But we will definitely not go back without you. Please forgive us, young master. Ling Tian was speechless. Looking at his own 5-year-old body, he understood that it was impossible to let them return on their own. Helpless, he could only say, all right, follow me if you are willing. But let me make matters clear first. If you cannot keep up with me, then find a spot near the gate of the mansion to wait for me to come back. The both of them agreed immediately. A short while later, both the servants were panting heavily with their hand on their knees and face completely flushed red. As for Ling Tian, he was already out of their sights. Looking at the bustling crowd in front of them, they could not help but be at a loss. As one of them finally regained his breath, he said with amazement, I say, second brother, this young master of ours is a real weirdo. The other servant wiped off his sweat and said, indeed. I have never seen a 5-year-old child run even faster than a rabbit. It can't be helped, young master went in the direction of the city gates. Let us wait for him there. Ling Tian weaved through the crowds as though he was taking a stroll. With his small size, he was able to weave through them easily without them even knowing. In the front, the figures of those burly men dressed in black could be seen. They were at the city gates waiting to exit. It seems that the boy had indeed left the city, Ling Tian thought. Ling Tian was rather disappointed. With such a weather, it was akin to seeking death if he were to leave the city. With his intelligence, Ling Tian felt that he was blowing matters up. Is this little brat worth my effort? Ling Tian shook his head, since I have already started, let me complete it. With Ling Tian's character, he would not allow himself to give up halfway. Thinking about this, Ling Tian walked towards the city gates. Looking at Ling Tian's luxurious clothes and arrogant aura, the guards of the city gates did not dare to stop him and let him out immediately. As he left the city, he saw a sea of white in front of him. A few black dots then dashed towards a single direction. They were the men dressed in black. In that direction, it seemed as though there was smoke rising from afar in a forest ahead. As Ling Tian looked to the horizon, he asked himself, if I was being chased, would I choose that direction to run in? The answer was, of course not. Ling Tian carefully observed the cluster of footsteps at the exit of the city gates and realized that there were roughly the same number of people going in all directions without the obvious footprint of a child. Ling Tian thought for a moment and walked ahead. Then, with the position he was in as an axis, he turned around to take a look at his surroundings. After walking up to here, the footprints from the city gates were already scattered much clearer than before. As Ling Tian took a closer look, he could not find any small footprints. Ling Tian laughed in his heart. This fellow is really interesting. Chapter 24. The test begins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 24. The test begins. Translator. David T. Editor. So obviously, that boy definitely put on a pair of adult shoes. If not, he would have worn a large pair of socks on top of his own shoes. No wonder he dared to run out of the city. So that's the reason. Ling Tian's disappointed heart began to grow excited again. Ling Tian asked himself, if I were him, which direction would I run in? Directly ahead was the public road. Since the organization pursuing the boy was obviously not small, he definitely would not take that road. With a weather like this, taking the public road was as good as surrendering. To the right was the direction where the men in black chased after. There was smoke rising from afar with a large forested area which seemed like a good place to hide. However, the truth wasn't really the case. Everyone would think that it was the best place to hide, so that would also become the place where he would be found the most easily. To the left was a small path with less footprints. Furthermore, it was a completely flat plain with no hiding place until a small village afar. It was a long road with no vegetation to the sides. Obviously, this was a place where someone running for his life would never go to. But with Ling Tian's vast experience of escaping, this road was the safest. Ling Tian smiled in his heart, if you choose this path, I will help you. But if you did not choose this path, I will not help you even if you were to die in front of me. Because that would mean that you are not worth for me to save. Ling Tian turned into a flash in the snowy grounds and sprinted towards the left like lightning. In a small desolate village with only tens of families, at times, the few people who passed by the narrow walkway were filled with hunger on their faces. The whole village was extremely quiet and desolate with a dull atmosphere all over. At times, there was the sound of barking dogs. As Ling Tian walked alone on the road, his eyes scanned around in search for a possible hiding place. If that boy was able to escape so far, he was completely fitting of Ling Tian's expectations. As everyone saw this well-dressed young man, they all displayed fear with a tinge of doubt within them. Why would a young master of a rich family appear here? Ling Tian's actions were very fast. He quickly walked through the whole village once. He also made a pick of the best hiding places within the village and found the 3 best hiding spots. A test which the one taking it was ignorant about had already began. Furthermore, it was already at its final stages. First, the boy must escape until here at the very least before fulfilling the basic criteria. Furthermore, from the location of his hiding spot, Ling Tian would be able to tell how resolute this person was. Sprinting here from the city was definitely a great toll on the body. If he was able to escape until here, he must have spent a lot of thought planning his escape. But all of these weren't enough. In order to meet Ling Tian's expectations, he must definitely hide himself immediately after escaping here. Furthermore, he would definitely require some food after expending so much energy. But if there was going to be a person begging or stealing food at that moment, he would definitely reveal himself. Thus, he had to endure even further. The 3 hiding spots which Ling Tian picked out also had rankings. The one at the back of the village was the lousiest of them all. Although it was the most concealed, it was also the most dangerous. The moment it's blocked, there's no chance for escape at all. The hiding place to the left of the village allowed one to attack or retreat. However, he would also have to pass through the whole village before arriving at that hiding place. The hiding place which Ling Tian was most satisfied with was a pile of rubble before the entrance of the village which had no way to hide someone. If that boy was able to hide there, his intelligence was at an extremely scary level. If he chose that place, he must be extremely bold, because that was the first place the enemy would see. He must also be extremely meticulous, finding the right hiding spot in a single glance and entering it immediately. Furthermore, he must also have a great understanding of the human heart in order to choose this hiding spot. This place was just too obvious with no obvious hiding place. Thus, this was the place where his pursuers were most likely to overlook and rush straight into the village to search. Once everywhere in the village had been searched through, this place still wouldn't draw the attention of anyone. The best part was that he would not have to pass by the village at all and would not leave behind a trace. If that boy was able to escape to this point but not within any of these 3 hiding spots, Ling Tian would immediately give up on him. He would only be able to barely meet the mark if he chose one of these 3 hiding spots. In Ling Tian's heart, he would only want the elites with great potential. If one did not have potential, Ling Tian would not even give him a second look. Ling Tian decided to begin his search from the back of the village. After he entered and looked around, Ling Tian turned and walked out. There was no one. Ling Tian had a gut feeling that the boy must have definitely escaped until here. It was just that he didn't know where he was hiding. With a bit of joy, Ling Tian went to the left of the village. This place was an abandoned shed with the walls of the place collapsed and winds blowing from all over. As Ling Tian walked over, he couldn't find any footprints on the floor. After considering for a moment, Ling Tian decided to walk in still. There were a few bunches of withered grass which were placed around messily. It was obvious that there wasn't much space in this broken shed. Ling Tian looked around the place generally before standing in the center of the shed, circulating his inner qi and feeling the movements all around him. A while later, the corners of Ling Tian's lips twitched upwards as he revealed a delighted smile. Yes, in this shed, there was a subtle breathing sound. Obviously, it was the boy who escaped here. Ling Tian was extremely satisfied. Although he did not choose the spot which Ling Tian thought was the best, he was still extremely careful and meticulous from the way he was able to hide here and remove all traces on the snow. If the person searching the place wasn't someone who was at the Xiantian stage like Ling Tian, he would definitely not be able to find the boy for sure. After meeting so many people, it seemed as though there was no one who knew what inner qi actually was. Ling Tian smiled with satisfaction and walked forward, stopping in front of a small pile of withered grass. Then, he said softly, "Come on out, don't hide anymore. You are inside." Chapter 25. Little Beggar, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 25. Little Beggar Translator. David T. Editor. Sell. Not a sound came from the inside. Furrowing his brow, Ling Tian repeated himself in a deeper tone. There was still no response. Ling Tian began to get a little impatient. Since I've already found you, it shouldn't matter to you whether I'm one of your captives, but rather, the fact that you cannot escape for the time being. If that's the case, then you should walk out happily. Did you think that by hiding inside like a turtle in its shell, you would be safe? Taking a step forward, Ling Tian kicked. With a walla sound, the grasses and the piled-up snow flew to the far distance. Below them was a tiny figure huddled up. This was the same beggar that Ling Tian saw who was fleeing for his life. Ling Tian knitted his brows, such a large movement, yet the little beggar still continued to huddle there without any movement. Approaching closer for a better look, Ling Tian suddenly gave a mocking smile. Turns out that the fellow had already fainted. It was no wonder that he only heard such a weak breathing. As it turns out, the little beggar had already sunk into a coma and could just die in his sleep at any moment. Stretching out his right hand, he felt the little beggar's forehead. It was burning hot to the point it was frightening. It seemed like he even caught a high fever. This situation was troublesome now. Ling Tian thought of home remedies used in his previous world to treat fevers, but after running through them all at once, he realized that not one could be used in this set of circumstances. Tapping his head, Ling Tian came to the conclusion that he had to first take drastic measures to wake that little beggar up. Grabbing a handful of snow from his side, he gripped it tightly to mold it into a block of snow, before wiping it against the beggar's face. Under the stimulation from the cold, the little beggar involuntarily let out a moan. Grasping the block of snow, Ling Tian's movements got faster and faster as he used the snow to rub on the skin of the little beggar. Even his palms could feel the snow warming up. This was a method which was beyond crude, and yet, it was clear that this sort of method was extremely effective. For patients suffering from frost bites, such a method was actually the optimal way for them to treat them. While the little beggar was not actually suffering from frost bites, he after all caught his fever from the biting chill. Thus, Ling Tian was certain that such a method would definitely bring about some help. As it happened, after one barely perceptible groan came from the little beggar's throat, he finally slowly opened his eyes. Upon seeing Ling Tian, he clearly jerked in shock. In such a scenario and place, he would never have dreamed of meeting a boy roughly the same age as him, with white skin that looked like it was touched up with cosmetics. It was as if he had been dreaming all along. Seeing that he had already woken up, Ling Tian let out a breath of relief, before asking, "How do you feel now that you have woken up?" The little beggar stared distractedly for a while before replying, "Did you save me?" After he finished, he then found out that the grass bundle in which he had squeezed himself into had been thrown to the side. His gaze became penetrating as he asked guardedly, "Who are you? Why are you here?" Ling Tian gave a slight smile, "I was following you from inside the city." "You really can run." While his tone was light, it was full of innate arrogance as though he was a person who had lived high up in the heavens. The little beggar got even more panic-stricken, shaking his still befuddled brain as he strenuously asked, "You've been following me. What motives do you have?" Ling Tian snorted, the tips of his feet pushing aside the dead grass on the ground, "If I hadn't followed you, then with that illness and the cold, I'm afraid you would be so dead." The little beggar was struck speechless. With his intelligence, it was not difficult for him to understand. If it was not for the fact that this child who was about the same age as him had found him, he would most likely have lost his life. He originally thought of resting a bit before continuing his journey, but who knew that due to his fatigue and the fact that he was suffering from hunger, he actually fainted. Ling Tian cut to the chase, directly asking, "Why were those pursuers going after you? What have you done?" Hearing Ling Tian's words, hatred shot out from deep within the eyes of the little beggar, and his dizzy head also cleared a little, "A death feud." This sentence was said with gritted teeth. He initially did not want to answer, but in his heart, he vaguely had a suspicion that this little boy standing in front of him could provide some measure of assistance. He now had nothing to his name and was still being hunted down. If he had no one to rely on, then even if he was able to escape for a day or two, he would still be hunted down eventually. He need not even think of taking his revenge of blood. However, this little boy in front of him could possibly give him this chance. His body could not hold on for much longer. Ling Tian grunted in response, then drew out 3 pristine white buns from his robes, saying, "You must probably be hungry. Eat this first, then tell me your story." The eyes of the little beggar lit up as he greedily stared at the buns in Ling Tian's hands. With a gulu sound, his mouth was flooded with saliva. He literally snatched the food over and began to wolf them down voraciously. Through his intermittent narration, Ling Tian found out that the little beggar in front of him was called Du Fei and was the son of Du Yuan, a merchant in the city. Their family operated 2 pawn shops and life was considered manageable. Last month, someone had pawned off a treasured jewel. Since the 10,000 orchid pearl was made entirely of white jade and furthermore inlaid with all sort of precious gems on the surface, the price was incomparable. Of course, the Du family did not have the ability to accept such a lavish item. However, the original owner was a descendant of a declined aristocrat family, and whatever that was of value to him had long been pawned away, only leaving this family heirloom. Furthermore, the family knew that the Du family was not able to pay out for such a treasure and thus only listed out a price of 10,000 taels of silver. They set the deadline for half a year, in which the original owner would then use the 10,000 taels of silver to buy back the item. Since the Du family had been dealing with all of this family's pawned items beforehand, due to sentimentality, Du Yuan decided to proceed with the deal. Who would have known that just as they were exchanging the items, they were spotted by a section leader of the Blood Flower Hall. When the section leader made his report, the hall master of this Blood Flower Hall immediately harbored thoughts of greed in his heart and sent people over to the Du family, wanting to buy over that 10,000 orchid pearl for only 5,000 taels. Du Yuan of course would not agree, since the descendant of the declined aristocrat family had said that it was only for a loan of 10,000 taels in which he would return to reclaim the treasure. Besides, how could the real price of this 10,000 orchid pearl be only worth 5,000 taels? Even if it were 10 times the price, one would still probably not be able to buy it. Du Yuan promptly rejected it. However, how could he have known that such a rejection would bring about an extermination of his family clan? The whole Du household of over 100 people were silenced in just a night. It was unknown to whom the 10,000 orchid pearl had fallen to. Luckily for Du Fei, he managed to escape because he appeared skinny and weak, and was thus a small target. However, the Blood Flower Hall definitely did not let him go so as to eliminate any future troubles and thus chased after him in hot pursuit. The present Du Fei had already not eaten in 3 days. In this half a month, Du Fei had hidden left and fled right, going through much suffering to barely escape from the clutches of death. Upon explaining his plight, Du Fei stared at Ling Tian with a hopeful expression on his face. From how Ling Tian dressed, he was definitely not a small-time figure, and as long as he returned home and spoke of this treasure to his family members, then he, Du Fei, could use the 10,000 orchid pearl as a bait to get someone else to do the dirty work for him. Ling Tian smiled, "What do you intend to do?" Du Fei felt his heart aflame as he stood up straight and said, "As long as young master is willing to help this small one take his revenge, this small one will gift the 10,000 orchid pearl to young master." Hearing this, Ling Tian only gave a cold laugh. "After I destroy Blood Flower Hall, the 10,000 orchid pearl would belong to me, why would I still need you to give it to me? As a man facing the killers who exterminated your family, you only have this much of resolve." Chapter 26. Vicious Oath. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 26. Vicious Oath. Translator David T. Editor. Cell with reddened eyes, Du Fei spat out in grief and indignation, "Then what else do you want me to do? I don't have any strength and neither do I have influence. Even if I want to take revenge on my own, wouldn't I just be seeking my own death? This young master, even if you do not want to help me take revenge, you don't have to insult me." With an arrogant smile on his face, Ling Tian merely said, "Insult you? Just based on your current looks of a stray dog, are you even worthy of me insulting you?" Du Fei was angered to the point where his entire body was shaking. "You don't go too far." If it weren't for him taking into consideration that the other party had saved his life, Du Fei would have just pounced forward, fists blazing. Ling Tian stood up, revealing an expression of disinterest and spoke indifferently, "Please do not be mistaken. Towards a person who wants to simply borrow someone else's hand to take revenge, I don't even have the slightest bit of interest to insult them. That's because such a person is worse than a dog. Even a dog will bite a person if it's threatened, but you only know how to bark at a corner. Oh no, you might not even dare to bark out. Shaking his head, Ling Tian threw out a tail of silver as he continued, boring. Take this and run for your life. For a person with no backbone like you, don't even think about getting revenge, just find a place to properly live. Even living as a turtle in its shell is quite good. Ha ha ha. After that wave of mocking laughter, Ling Tian started to move back to where he came from. As he walked back he said, I originally thought of giving you hope, making you strong enough to take your own revenge. Ha ha ha, to think that you just wanted to use me, he he he. Insulting from top to bottom. Du Fei's body was shivering uncontrollably. His face changed from green to red as he listened to Ling Tian's provocations. In that instant, he felt extremely ashamed of himself. Every word and every sentence felt like a steel knife viciously gorging itself deep in his heart, causing so much pain that his body spasmed in response. Suddenly, he heard Ling Tian's final words as he was walking away, I originally thought of giving you hope, making you strong enough to take your own revenge. Du Fei jumped as though he had been given an electric shock and stared at the back of the departing Ling Tian. He suddenly dashed towards him madly, even forgetting to take the tail of silver thrown out to him. No, he did not even register that piece of silver. As Ling Tian walked, he counted under his breath slowly. In his heart, Ling Tian only gave Du Fei up to 10 seconds to grab onto this chance. If he reached 10 and Du Fei had not yet caught up, then Ling Tian would leave without so much as turning his head. There would be nothing worth staying for anyway. 5, 6, 7. From behind him came the frenzied sound of running footsteps, and the corners of Ling Tian's mouth curled up in a smile. Du Fei ran over as though he was flying, and had just caught up to Ling Tian. However, before he could control and slow down his body's momentum from the rapid running earlier, he had already kneeled down with a "pu" sound. Young master, please hold up. Ling Tian turned back leisurely, staring at the kneeling Du Fei in front of him indifferently, without a shred of emotion on his face. Du Fei knocked his head heavily on the ground while saying, Young master, I desire revenge. I desire strength. I want to personally avenge my parents. Please help me to accomplish my aim. Ling Tian stood tall and upright, and saw that the knocking of his head had formed a depression in the snow, and that the pang-pang sounds created from his knocking were getting gradually louder and sharper. He maintained a straight face without any emotions leaking through, saying, Sure. I can help to make you really strong such that you can personally slay all your enemies. I can achieve all these. However, they all require a corresponding price. You should be clear that I am not helping you because I pity you. What else can you pay? What can you give me? As long as you can convince me, then you have the possibility of obtaining everything that I've said. Taking 2 more steps forward unhurriedly, he continued, this sort of things cannot be obtained just because you kowtow to me. If you cannot convince me, even if you were to knock your brain into pieces, I would still not be willing to help you. Du Fei blankly stood up, muttering to himself, what can I pay? What can I pay? Ling Tian coldly remarked, the weather here is cold, I have no interest in dawdling with you. Oh, by the way, that 10,000 orchid pearl or whatever it's called, there's no need to talk about it anymore. This young master doesn't even put it in his eyes. Do you know who I am? Du Fei raised his head, a face full of questioning. Ling Tian blandly remarked, my surname is Ling, named Tian. Ever heard of the Ling family? I'm the only young master of the Ling family. Du Fei was shocked to the point he stared with his mouth agape. To think that the person opposite him was actually from one of the most outstanding families in the empire, the Ling family's young master. Just based on the Ling family's finances, not to mention 1 orchid pearl, even tens or hundreds of them were insufficient for them to take notice. In that case, what could he actually fork out? Traces of impatience appeared on Ling Tian's face. He said, "Okay, I'll be leaving now. Since you cannot think of anything, then I wish you all the best from now on." He turned to leave with no reluctance whatsoever. Du Fei flew into panic. Throwing himself in front of Ling Tian, he tightly grabbed onto his legs while screaming, "Young master! Young master! I do not have anything of value to give to young master, I only have this little life, and although it may be worth little, as long as young master desires it, this little one will throw out his worthless life." Ling Tian finally smiled, "Life, interesting, this is now getting interesting. Ha ha ha, but just based on life, it's still not enough." Du Fei was frozen in shock. Other than his life, what else could he give? He had nothing left. Ling Tian's expression turned frosty as he boomed, "Stand up and listen to me." Du Fei's body trembled as his eyes revealed expressions of ecstasy. He hurriedly stood up as he heard the command. Ling Tian stared hard into Du Fei's eyes as he continued, "Since you managed to think of giving away your life, which happens to be about half of what I've thought of, I've decided to tell you what else is it that I require." Du Fei's expression tightened. His ears perked up involuntarily, as though afraid that he would miss the next few words that Ling Tian was about to say. Ling Tian enunciated slowly, "I can let you reach a height which ordinary mortals can never dream of touching. I, too, can grant you sufficient strength needed to conquer all under the heavens, without anybody being your opponent. I can also give you the power to hold life and death of every single person under the heavens except mine. Do you understand me?" Sticking out his chest, Du Fei's eyes let out a scorching brilliance as he spoke, "I understand now. Young master, you shall have this little one's life and soul. What I can further give you is my undying loyalty." Ling Tian laughed satisfyingly, "Loyalty. Ha ha ha, I admire you for being able to figure it out, albeit with hints from me. However, I do not just want loyalty, but instead I need your absolute obedience. Even if I ask you to die. This is not just something you hang at your mouth." Du Fei's small stature suddenly kneeled down, raising his hands towards the sky, "O heavens above. This little one, Du Fei, uses my parents' and ancestors' names to swear that from today onwards, Du Fei will thus devote his unerring loyalty and service to young master Ling Tian. If I were to betray my oath, then may my ancestors be condemned to hell, never to reincarnate. My male descendants shall be slaves and females be prostitutes for eternity." Ling Tian felt emotionally moved, yet terrified. In this world, oaths were heavily regarded. The people here believed that when someone passed away, their spirit and souls would enter another world to await the cycle of samsara, then be reborn again. In the past, even for an important matter, most people would only afflict the curse upon their own bodies, and no one ever dared to use his own ancestors and descendants as a target too. For Du Fei to use his ancestors and successive generations, the oath was severe beyond compare and could be considered extremely vicious to himself. Such an oath, once spoken, could not be taken back. Thus Du Fei could be considered to have burned off all his paths of retreat. Du Fei was very clear that if what Ling Tian promised would come to fruition, then he would definitely want to have the absolute loyalty of the said person. Or else, if one were to personally groom out an extremely strong traitor and enemy, would he not be digging his own grave? Thus, without any hesitation, Du Fei chose an oath that no one had ever done before, and viciously used it upon himself. No one would take their own ancestors to crack a joke, and what's more their descendants. Furthermore, who in their right minds would make such a vicious joke? Ling Tian's face remained impassive and he looked towards Du Fei, saying, "As of now, the name Du Fei is no more. Your new name shall now be Ling Jian. Surname Ling from the Ling family, and Jian meaning the sword. Do you understand? From today onwards, you shall be a sword in my hand. The sharpest, most powerful sword." Du Fei, "Oh no," now Ling Jian, looked as though there were lights shooting out of his eyes as he replied, "Yes. Young master, from today onwards, I shall be called Ling Tian. I shall be young master's sharpest sword. Chapter 27. A problem of address. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 27. A problem of address. Translator David T. Editor. Cell. At this moment, Ling Tian gradually understood what kind of path Ling Tian was arranging for him. Ling Tian could already predict that this road which Ling Tian had arranged for him would definitely be filled with blood and killings, darkness and sin. Ling Tian. That was a name full of killing intent. 1. Ling Tian smiled with satisfaction as he said, in order to become a qualified sword, you must still go through continuous molding. I will be the blacksmith. This process will be filled with great dangers. There's a chance for you to lose your life at any moment. You have to be prepared for this. With regard to what Ling Tian said, Ling Tian was not surprised at all. This was completely within his expectations. In order for an ordinary 7 to 8-year-old child to become a sharp sword filled with blood and killing, the process would definitely be extremely arduous. The sharpness of a sword is from grinding. The fragrance of the blossom flower is from bearing the bitter winter. This should be the way. As Ling Tian faced Ling Tian, he felt that this young master of his was definitely not an ordinary young master of an aristocratic family. In front of Ling Tian, Ling Tian felt as though he was unable to hide anything at all. It was as though he was completely naked with all of his secrets laid bare, including the deepest parts of his soul. In truth, Ling Tian was a few years younger than him. Ling Tian was puzzled. How will Ling Tian mold me into an expert able to stand on top of the world? But he did not dare to say that aloud. Seeing Ling Tian's doubtful face, Ling Tian laughed as he said calmly, "Follow me." Then, Ling Tian began to walk forward. After a few steps, he grabbed a fist-sized rock which was covered by snow and smiled at Ling Tian. As he rubbed his hands lightly, the hard rock immediately became dust, falling down from Ling Tian's palms. After slapping his hands a few times, Ling Tian then asked, "Are you confident now?" Ling Tian was dumbfounded. Following which, he broke out into ecstasy, his whole body trembling in excitement. Thinking about how he was doubtful, Ling Tian could not help but say with embarrassment, "This subordinate deserves to die. I actually doubted young master. Please punish me, young master." Ling Tian ignored him and continued walking forward as his voice sounded, "It can't be blamed on you. But I hope that you will never doubt me again." Ling Tian's eyes began to burn, "Yes, young master." Then, he followed his young master as he suddenly felt that the world was filled with hope and life. He felt a sense of excitement and relaxation which he had never felt before in his life. In front, Ling Tian suddenly stopped as his face turned serious. Ling Tian felt his heart skip a beat as he quickly cupped his hands in respect, not knowing what his young master wanted to say. He then heard Ling Tian saying, Ling Tian, don't call me young master in future, I do not like those two words. You can just call me young noble." Ling Tian immediately agreed as he was puzzled as to why his young master would not allow himself to be called young master. Isn't young master and young noble the same thing? Changing the address is just like changing the taste of the medicine without changing the prescription. Although he was puzzled, he could only bury the doubts in his heart. As he looked at Ling Tian's expression, it seemed extremely strange with his face even blushing slightly. It was as though Ling Tian felt embarrassed. Ling Tian immediately became even more puzzled. How would Ling Tian know that Ling Tian had suddenly remembered that in his previous life, there were some young men in the high-class clubs who were officially known as public relations staff, but in reality, their job was to accompany the rich women. Furthermore, they were commonly known as young master. My goodness! I only just realized it. Ling Tian suddenly realized that all of the maids and outsiders seemed to have a single way of addressing him. Young master. This even included all of his aunts. Pukes. Ling Tian suddenly made the sound of one vomiting while walking. Following which, he began to vomit non-stop as his face became pale. Ling Jian, who was behind, had a face full of bewilderment. Just what is wrong with young master? When the both of them arrived at the city gates, it was already in the afternoon. Facing the guards of the city gates, Ling Tian showed a jade talisman and the guards respectfully received the two boys. The two servants were waiting anxiously in the city with their necks long from waiting. As time slowly passed, the both of them became more and more worried. As they thought about the punishment they would receive if they lost the young master, they began to have blank looks on their faces as their body was on the verge of collapsing. Finally, they saw Ling Tian walking in slowly from the city gates with his footsteps shaky and face pale. Both the servants dashed forward as though they saw a treasure, with tears almost coming out of their eyes. "Young master, you are finally back." Young master, what is wrong with you? Why is your face so pale? Are you sick, young master? Ling Tian stared at the two servants with a vicious look. Hearing them call him young master, Ling Tian wanted to swallow them alive. He then snapped at them, "Don't call me young master." Both of the servants looked towards each other as they thought, "Don't tell me young master became possessed after leaving the city." Concern filled their eyes as they asked, "Young master, you..." Before they even finished their sentence, Ling Tian began to fly into a fit of rage. "Don't call me young master. I don't allow you to call me young master. Damn it, are you guys deaf? If you guys call me young master again, I will skin you guys alive." Ling Tian was enraged. Being at the peak of his anger, Ling Tian began to curse. At that moment, the city gates were filled with pin-drop silence. The section of 10 men who were about to send Ling Tian back all stared at each other as they thought. This young master of the Ling family is actually so fierce to his servants even at such a young age. He actually cursed them in public like that. At that moment, all of them began to lament for General Ling. His son is really unlike him. The two servants almost wanted to cry. Young Ling Tian was completely depressed. Hearing that they almost called him young master again, he could not help but roar, F***K. His voice sounded like thunder, everyone around could hear it. With a darkened face, Ling Tian brought Ling Jian into a small sedan which the city guards prepared like a volcano which was about to explode. Ling Jian did not dare to sit in the sedan, but with a little bit of force, Ling Tian easily carried him up. In the end, Ling Tian used too much force and Ling Jian's shoulder was dislocated with a pop sound. Chapter 28. City Gates Rumors. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 28. City Gates Rumors. Translator David T. Editor. When Ling Tian got up the sedan and left the city gates, a procession of luxurious carriages covered in a black cloth entered slowly into the city gates. There were golden chrysanthemum flowers weaved upon the carriage's exterior. As the city gates saw the golden chrysanthemum, they immediately stood at attention, saluting with their spears. They did not even check the carriage at all as it entered the city without reducing its speed. It was as though they were used to seeing the reaction of the guards and did not have any reaction. As the commander of the guards saw the carriages enter the city, he wiped the sweat which had formed on his forehead as he exclaimed with fright in his voice, "My goodness, what day is it today? Why did this person enter the city?" By the side, a young soldier with face full of acne asked curiously, "Sir, who is that? Why does he look so arrogant?" Before he got to finish his sentence, his mouth was covered by the captain. "Little ancestor of mine, will you die if you do not say anything? Are you trying to kill us all?" All of the older troops then gave a deathly glare at the genius, who almost caused trouble for them, rushing forward to give him a good beating. A short while later as they saw the carriages leave, the captain said with a trembling voice, "That was so close. It seems that his mood is pretty good today. You bastard. When you go off duty later, go and punish yourself with the whip. In future, don't ask things that you are not supposed to." All of the older soldiers began to nod in agreement. In the front most carriage, the curtains of the sedan were lifted and a cute head popped out of it. She was a 4 to 5 year old child with black hair, soft skin and beautiful eyebrows. Her lips were thin with big and shiny eyes. Despite her young age, everyone was able to tell with a single look that she was a beauty. When she grows up, she would definitely be a rare gem. At that very moment, her red lips were chewing onto some snacks as she asked, "Grandpa, so this is the capital?" "Wow, it's so big. There are so many people. Look there, it's so pretty." Her voice was extremely attractive. As she said that, she looked around with her black eyes. In the carriage, an old voice sounded, My good Schwer, this is the capital. Back then, Grandpa stayed here for 20 years. Speaking to this point, his old voice was already filled with a deep sigh as though he was reminiscing something. The little girl, Schwer, was naturally unable to understand her grandfather's feelings. Her head was still stuck out of the window as she looked around in excitement. At times, she also screamed out, "Wow! Look there, there is a pretty lantern. Grandpa, quickly take a look, there is a monkey on his shoulder. He. Oi, little monkey. Look there, there are haw balls there, help me buy a stick of that. Yes, quickly. Oh no, humph." In the carriage, a 50 to 60 year old man dressed in a pair of purple robes sat on the rocking carriage, looking at his granddaughter scream and shout in excitement excitedly with a doting smile. His eyes then narrowed for a moment as he thought, Imperial capital. I, Xiao Fenghan, am back. Outside the carriage, there were people pulling in sails, sounds of bargaining, the cries of children, various chatters and more. Suddenly, as though the old man heard something, his face changed and he stretched out his right hand from the window and gave a mysterious hand sign. The whole procession of carriages suddenly stopped. In fact, they did not stop completely, their speed slowed down to a point where it was 10 times slower than before. In the eyes of an ordinary individual, this procession of carriages was as good as stationary. The little girl was the most excited as she jumped off the carriage and ran towards the hawker selling the haw balls. She then took a stick of them, smiling as she ate it. The hawker was stunned for a moment, looking at this adorable child, he had forgotten to collect money from him for a moment. After being in a short daze, a large hand stretched out by the side with an ingot of silver falling into his hands. Just when the hawker wanted to give his thanks, the person ignored and walked away. For a moment there, the hawker felt that he was in a dream. A short distance away from the carriage, there were a few people discussing something, with their saliva flying all around. The thing which drew the attention of the old man in the carriage was the conversation among these men. In the carriage, the eyes of the old men were shut as the words of the men flowed into his ears without a single word missing. Do you guys know? Something happened at the city gates just now. Oh, what happened? BDNV, hehe, do you guys know about the Ling mansion? The young master of the Ling family was creating a scene at the city gates just now. Ah. You're referring to young master Ling Tian. I've heard about it already. Despite his young age, he is extremely domineering. I even heard that he almost beat his cousin to death on the first lesson with his teacher. Furthermore, he even hit the teacher. I have also heard about that. The rumors are indeed true. Right at the city gates just now, his guards did not offend him and had only called him young master once. But he was not willing to accept that address and scolded them on the spot. The words he used were just too unpleasant to the ears, and he even knocked 2 teeth out from that guard of his. Just what is wrong with his guards calling him young master? Such a young child is really. As he said that, he shook his head with a look of disdain. This isn't considered much, at least he is still beating up someone from his own family. I heard that in the afternoon on Azure Dragon Street, he beat someone up for no good reason, crippling that person. At that time, the person was tens of feet away from him and did not even provoke him at all. He is just domineering to the extreme. Ah, isn't anyone from his family going to discipline him? This person was someone who had just joined the conversation. Che, what do you know? This young master is the son of General Ling, the only grandson of Duke Ling. Who would dare to discipline him? As for his own family, they can't wait to dote on him. Discipline. You must be dreaming. With the strength of the Ling family, not to mention beating a few people up, he would be fine even if he killed a few hundred innocent people. Hayes, if this child were to grow up, he will be another plague in the capital. Someone shook his head with a sigh. When he grows up. Brother, he is already a plague in the capital right now. Hayes, I was referring to the large amount of ladies who are going to suffer in his hands when he grows up. I heard that when this young master was going through the 1-year-old catch ceremony, he caught the fragrance bag of his aunt. I heard that Duke Ling had thrown out all of the fragrance bags from the mansion back then, afraid that he would pick that. In the end, the consort herself had one. But this child refused to pick anything up at the beginning, only catching the fragrance bag the moment his aunt arrived. He will definitely be a lecher when he grows up. He. Ah. There was this matter as well. Thankfully, I do not have a daughter. If not, she will definitely be destroyed by him. I won't even have a place to go to if I want to file a report to him. Scram, with that face of yours, it would be good if someone would want your daughter. Just who is young Master Ling Tian, would he take fancy to your daughter? In the carriage, the purple-robed elder's face became uglier and uglier by the second. As he heard till the end, his face had already turned completely ashen. His chest began to rise and fall with his heavy breathing as his eyes were burning with rage. He then scolded hatefully, "Damn it, you old bastard. This is the grandson-in-law you are giving me. This old man will not let you off." Chapter 29. 3-Year Plan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 29. 3-Year Plan. Translator David T. Editor. Sel. The little girl had long climbed up the chariot, and seeing her grandfather fuming in anger, she giggled. Her little body barreling towards her grandfather's embrace, she said, "Grandpa, don't be angry, Schwer will give you some haw ball, he. While chewing on the sour sweet haw ball in her mouth, the old man could only reluctantly squeeze out a smile, stretching out a hand to caress his granddaughter's hair. However, his heart remained extremely heavy. If this is the case, then wouldn't it be this bag of old bones ruining my granddaughter's marriage? He took yet another long sigh, steeling his heart that after the audience with the emperor, he would immediately head to condemn that disgraceful old fogey. Slightly in front of the purple-robed old man's chariot, which was emblazoned with the symbol of a golden chrysanthemum flower, there was a chariot with over 10 soldiers escorting. Inside that chariot, Ling Tian was reclined inside without any poise whatsoever. Opposite him sat Ling Jian in an upright position, showing extreme respect towards him. His hands and legs seemed to have no place to comfortably rest on, making him look as though he was extremely uncomfortable. Ling Tian cast a glance at him before speaking, "Ling Jian." Ling Jian hurriedly shot up straight, "Young noble, this little one is here. Awaiting your instructions." At this moment, after witnessing for himself the power of Ling Tian, the latter in Ling Jian's heart was not simply just his master in person to show loyalty towards, but rather more like a deity to worship. In his life, this was the first time he had seen someone actually use a pair of bare hands to grind limestone into powder. Don't even talk about seeing it, Ling Jian had never even heard of such a thing. Even the legends did not speak of such an incident happening. Ling Tian could only heave a sigh. "Sit down, Ling Jian. Next time when you're around me, there's no need to be so respectful and cautious, I'm not used to it. Just revert back to your original personality, that would be fine." Ling Jian sprang upright, "Yes. Young master." Letting out a groan, Ling Tian tossed his hands up in defeat, saying, "Forget it, do as you wish." Ling Jian returned to his seat, but still kept his body ramrod straight. Ling Jian, how old are you right now? Replying young noble, I'm currently 9. Oh, already 9 years old, that's a little late. Have you practiced any martial skills in the past? Replying young noble, I have not. I only learned some body-strengthening methods from the martial arts instructors in the protection courts. Oh, then no wonder. As to what he suspected, Ling Tian did not say, but Ling Jian understood it in his heart. It was probably this little bit of insignificant foundation that was the reason that mysteriously allowed him to be noticed by Ling Tian. At this moment, in Ling Jian's heart, he could not help but feel gratitude for the instructor who had taught him a little of the body-strengthening art. Ling Jian, you were still feverish just now. How are you right now? Do you still feel dizzy? Ling Jian felt his eyes start to sting. After being on the run for nearly a month and having tasted the coldness of human emotions, this was the first time someone had really cared for his well-being. Thank you for the attention, young master, I no longer feel dizzy. This shows that your body constitution is passable. I will follow suit and include a regime of training meant to help you to resist the influence of drugs and poison. In future, this will be an asset to further guard your life. Ling Tian pondered for a while more, before slowly speaking, Ling Jian, right now, listen carefully to the arrangements that I've made for you and what I can help you with. Ling Jian had an expression full of excitement and emotion as he respectfully replied, yes. May young noble please instruct me. On the side of your enemies, what I can do is, within these 3 years, I will not lay a single finger on Blood Rose Hall. Do you understand what I'm saying? Ling Tian slowly spoke. Feelings of gratitude appeared in the eyes of Ling Jian, as he replied, yes. Ling Jian understands. He could completely understand the underlying meaning of Ling Tian's words, which was to leave the annihilation of Blood Rose Hall to him, so as to allow him the chance to personally avenge his blood feud. As a son, he wanted to use the fresh blood of his enemies to comfort his parents' souls in heaven. Ling Tian let out a satisfied smile, as the first sword under me, 3 years later would be the time to test out this sword of mine. As for Blood Rose Hall, it will serve as the first whetstone for your growth. In these 3 years, I will not do anything towards Blood Rose Hall. Neither will I bother to put pressure on them. However, after 3 years, I want the entire Blood Rose Hall to completely and entirely disappear by your hands. No matter how large they've grown. Ling Jian silently listened, his eyes flashing with bloodthirst. Upon visualizing the scene of the members in Blood Rose Hall falling under his sword as well as moaning and begging for forgiveness, his eyes lit up with excitement. Pausing for a moment, Ling Tian lazily continued, in these 3 years, I will teach you the pinnacle of killing sword arts in this world, increasing your killing skills on all fronts. If you aren't able to annihilate Blood Rose Hall after 3 years of me coaching you, then I will personally silence you. The moment he reached the last sentence, Ling Tian's tone turned exceptionally severe. Ling Jian felt a jolt pass through his entire body and his eyes turned steely. Biting off each word clearly, he replied, young noble, rest assured. If after the painstaking effort by young noble yourself, I still am unable to demolish Blood Rose Hall, Ling Jian would not have the face to remain in this world any longer either. With an "den" sound, Ling Tian spoke, from now on, you must be prepared. In the process of training you, there will be countless dangers you have to face. There is a chance that you will not be able to keep up with my training rhythm and end up losing your life. However, once you have passed my drills, then in this entire continent, you will move unhindered. Ling Jian shuddered from head to toe and his eyes turned bloodshot. What could be seen in the depths of his eyes was an unwavering determination to succeed or die trying. Ling Tian now calmly stood up and pulled open the screen of the chariot, leisurely getting off the vehicle. As he walked, he said, I'm now giving you the chance to be strong, to get your revenge. The rest depends on you. Follow me. Ling Jian also hurriedly got down, and as he looked up, a massive and impressively grand golden-colored door appeared before his eyes. Ling residence. All his hopes and dreams would start from here. The people inside the Ling residence all saw their own young master actually bringing back a filthy and dirty-looking beggar back, and all of them revealed looks of astonishment. Walking through the main door, he ordered his personal maid Qiu Yu, "Sister Qiu Yu, this little child is the study companion that I've bought just now. Could you bring him for a bath and a change of clothes, get him some food and sort him out before sending him to my room?" The moment he finished, he started to walk away on his own. Qiu Yu received a rude shock, before running behind him and calling out, "Young master, the madam wants you to go to her room when you are back. She says that she has something to tell you." In a flash, Ling Tian spun around, scowling at her, "Remember this. All who are in the Ling residence, none is allowed to call me young master. Just call me young noble, do all of you understand?" His voice resounded just like a crack of thunder. Qiu Yu was frightened out of her wits, her heart palpitating wildly as she hurriedly saluted, "Yes, young noble, this servant will remember." With a humph sound, Ling Tian continued, "Qiu Yu, I want you to inform all the servants in Ling residence that if I ever hear someone call me young master again, I'll pull out his tongue and break both his legs." Qiu Yu, as well as those bodyguards situated at the front of the main gate, all could not help but feel a shiver go down their spines. In the Ling residence, this young master's words were no joke. He even dared to mess around with Master Ling Kong's only son. What would he not dare to do? The crowd expressed their agreement profusely. On his side, the shadow of Ling Tian could not even be seen anymore. Chapter 30. Planned Marriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 30. Planned Marriage. Translator David T. Editor. Cell, for the whole of today, where exactly did you run off to? Instead of studying hard, why did you run off elsewhere? Chu Tinger held on to the feather duster with one hand, looking imposing and intimidating. "Eh? Your child went out to play for a while only, then came straight home." Scratching his scalp, Ling Tian put on a mask of innocence. "Oh. Ha ha ha, playing a while refers to the whole day. And to think you still dare to say that you came straight home." Chu Tinger spoke, not knowing to laugh or to be angry. Seeing how his son wore a face of nonchalance, it pissed her off, but at the same time made her want to burst out into a smile. She stretched out her hand to pinch his smooth cheeks, and with that pinch, she fondly pulled him into her chest. "Go and groom yourself properly, and don't go out tomorrow, your wife will be visiting." My wife. Even with memories of 2 lives, Ling Tian still felt his brain crash. Where had this wife come from? "In my 2 lives, I've always been a pure and untainted little chick." Nodding her head with certainty, she took the chance to pinch Ling Tian's face once again. "Yes, your wife, ha ha ha. My Tianer is already so big, how could he do without a wife?" Ling Tian was at a loss for words. If he did not remember his appearance wrongly, right now he should still be having the body of a 5-year-old child. Could it be that early marriages and early childbearing in the ancient times were actually at such a state? Under Chu Tinger's explanation did Ling Tian finally understand. Turns out that when he was still in his mother's stomach, grandfather Ling had gone to meet up with the greatest financial magnate, the Shao family head, and proposed a marriage with his daughter. In law's child. Both sides agreed that if both were males, then they would be sworn brothers, if they were both females, they would be sisters, and if it was a male and a female, then they would be a couple. Ling Tian suffered from a burst of depression. This system of feudalism could really cause the death of someone. What age was this, that a 5-year-old child could have already completed his lifelong milestone of being married? Ling Tian was certainly unhappy about this. He thought of actually pursuing someone to be his future wife. This could be due to the fact that even in his previous life, he had never tasted the feeling of being in love. In his heart, Ling Tian felt that love was full of mysteriousness, and was something he was looking forward to. Furthermore, in the depths of Ling Tian's heart, he was in conflict with the sort of political and beneficial marriages formed between families so as to boost both families' alliances. He also detested the fact that the family would sacrifice their descendants to carry out such a method. It was indeed true that in this world, only the strong would be respected. However, this definitely did not include love. One could even say that power and might could get you any woman's body, but not her heart and love. And what Ling Tian wanted was a lover, not a wife. Name or a tool for venting his lust, no matter if she was as beautiful as an immortal. Mother, I do not wish to have a wife. Please help me to reject the marriage. Ling Tian held on to Chu Tinger's arm, shaking it left and right, as he put on an attitude like a child throwing a tantrum. Bleg. Ling Tian vomited a little mentally, but he had no choice. Since this mother was not receptive to both hard and soft methods, the only way to deal with this problem was to use this move. Ling Tian had to act like he was immature. This won't do. Chu Tinger put on a fierce face, being resolute and not giving any ground to him. Your grandfather specially secured this marriage for you, how could it be poor? The other party must be a little beauty. Ling Tian furrowed his brows in reluctance and unwillingness, saying, no matter how pretty she is, she definitely cannot compare to Mother. Mother is the prettiest. He ruthlessly licked his mother, since such words were welcome in the ears of most women. Let alone being said by their own child, which contained only the most sincere admiration from someone whom she had weaned as well as a sense of dependence. Indeed, Chu Tinger immediately became more cheerful upon hearing that. With her face blossoming, she fiercely kissed Ling Tian's face while saying, so nice of you, Tianer. After being affectionate for a while, Chu Tinger finally said, oh right, Tianer, after you went out today, Mr. Qin wasn't too happy about it and his face was quite ugly to behold. You have to be careful this time and be a good boy, else if your teacher beats you, I won't be bothered about it. Ling Tian smiled to himself. The reason Mr. Qin was in low spirits was probably because of himself, but not like what his mother had described. Instead, it was because that old man was sure of himself, and yet had unknowingly been brought for a ride by a child merely 5 years of age. It would be surprising if he did not feel any indignation towards the matter. I'll go take a look. Ling Tian turned his body to leave. By the way, Mother, I brought back a little beggar from outside today. Let him follow me from now on. Before Chu Tinger had the chance to reply, his shadow could not be seen already. Chu Tinger could only let out a curse, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. This little fellow, how was this considered a request? It was more like merely informing her. As for why Ling Tian did this, Chu Tinger also understood. He was saying that he wanted the little beggar as his own personal attendant, and that they had better not employ him to do other tasks. Forget it, let him do as he pleases, Chu Tinger thought to herself, as she called over a serving maid and gave her a few instructions. Mr. Qin had a face full of black lines as he sat alone in the study room, still feeling gloomy about the fact that he got taken advantage of in the morning. As he sulked, he realized that Ling Tian was behaving furtively at the doorstep, and could not help but scold, since you've come back, why don't you come in? What are you looking at? Sniggering to himself, Ling Tian walked to stand in front of Mr. Qin. With a humph sound, Mr. Qin turned his head the other way. Toward this student of his, he had a love-hate relationship. Any word he spoke once would be captured and understood by Ling Tian, who could furthermore provide his own viewpoint to that matter, often allowing Mr. Qin to receive some enlightenment. Mr. Qin dared to conclude that Ling Tian could definitely inherit his legacy in future, promoting his studies and name to all under the heavens. However, what made him helpless was the fact that this student was, just too smart. And it was obvious that he had not put in all his brainpower into his studies. All his previous methods to coerce little children could not be used against him. Even to the point that giving him encouragement would result in him arguing back an entire chapter in return, and it would flow out in a torrent, with every word polished like a pearl. This usually made Mr. Qin enthralled as he realized that words could be used in such a way. In the end he would snap out of his trance, not knowing then who was the actual teacher and who the student was between the two of them. Sneaking a glance at Mr. Qin's facial expression, Ling Tian could naturally tell that his mood was not good, thus he decided to stretch his tongue and say, "Sir, this student has a matter which needs your help to clear my confusion." As he spoke, his expression and tone were all prim and proper. As Mr. Qin heard this, his heart was filled with satisfaction, quickly turning his head back, "Ha ha ha ha, good student, come say out any doubts you have. Teacher here will say all that he knows, without withholding any information." Humph, you little rascal, after all, the stuff that you know in this world is actually very little." With a groan, Ling Tian made a sour face as he said, "Just now mother told me that my pre-arranged fiancé is about to arrive." Mr. Qin was stunned. Only after quite a while did he come to his senses and furiously asked, "This is the question you wanted to consult your teacher with?" After his anger subsided somewhat, he realized that this was actually quite amusing. A wimpy kid merely a few years of age was already having a fiancé. Ling Tian sighed in an exaggerated manner before continuing, "How is that so? If I could settle this small problem easily, why would I bother great teacher?" Mr. Qin nodded his head slightly at this, appearing satisfied. However, Ling Tian actually continued, "Besides, Mr. is completely unable to be of help as well." Mr. Qin immediately flared up in a rage, "Bullshit. What kind of nonsense are you spouting?"